Okay, real talk. Have you ever gotten an apology from your spouse and then you walked away actually feeling worse than before they actually said anything to begin with? Like something happened, there's tension, and they said I'm sorry, but somehow you feel more frustrated, less heard, and maybe even a little bit gaslit. Or maybe you've been on the other side of it where you thought you apologized and handled it really well, but your spouse is still upset and you genuinely cannot figure out why. If you resonate with any of this video is really gonna help you. Because what I see a lot of the times when working with couples as a therapist is that a lot of people weren't really taught the right way to apologize. We were told to say sorry as a kid, usually before we even really understood what we did wrong or how we hurt the other person. And that 2-second transaction between us and that other kid and our parent telling us to say sorry wired us to just copy the same thing now as an adult. But actually, apologizing is a lot more than just throwing out those words. And there's a skill set to it that if you haven't learned, I want to teach you today. I'm going to break down what it includes, what makes an apology actually land or be received well, and just give you overall some really good practical tips to start implementing them into your relationship. If you're new here, by the way, my name is Catherine Solomon. I'm a licensed therapist and a virtual coach, and I love being able to help couples connect, communicate better, overall just have a healthier relationship. So if you are not subscribed already, please make sure that you are and like this video, and then let's go ahead and jump on in. The first thing that I want to talk about is why an apology actually matters way more than you think. I think talking about the why in the very beginning is really important. You might be just thinking like, seriously, Catherine, it's not that big of a deal. How complicated could it be? And I totally get that thought process. But here is what's happening under the surface when an apology doesn't happen or it goes wrong. Trust usually starts to erode slowly over time, and it definitely is one of those things that just kind of builds and compounds over time. When your spouse hurts you and then doesn't acknowledge it in a way that feels really real, your nervous system files that away. Like you are taking note of what just happened. And it's not just like one sticky note. It's like all of these sticky notes that you've pulled and filed away then become this story of how you see them, how you feel treated, the dynamic of like your whole relationship. Stories could sound like, I don't matter, or they don't actually really care to see me, or they just want to apologize so that they can feel better about themselves, but they're not actually sorry for the damage that they caused me. Or a really, really big one that makes me so sad is it's not safe to bring things up anymore. That is when a person is just, they've given up. It's not safe for them to talk about things anymore. They just gotta pull away, and that becomes the safest thing. And it's like putting up a wall and guarding their heart because it's not in good hands anymore. That kind of story is what creates distance in couples. You feel like you're walking on eggshells, you're just in this roommate phase, and sometimes you kind of wonder if you even like each other anymore, let alone love each other. It never starts with just one incident. It happens repeatedly. Where a repair didn't happen, the apology wasn't met well, was not even real, all of those different things. So the why of even why we're talking about this, because it really, really matters. So now let's talk about the non-apology apology, or why it wouldn't really be a good apology. I'm gonna call a couple things out, and I want you to receive this with grace, okay? This is not me attacking you. Probably every single one of us have done something like this before. We have said a really bad apology. It's not about shame, it's just about learning and doing things better next time. Here are some of the most non-apology apologies and why they can backfire. Okay, the first one is, I'm sorry that you feel that way. This is probably one of the most common ones that I hear, and I need you to understand why it doesn't work. I'm sorry that you feel that way isn't an apology. It's actually a deflection. It's essentially saying your feelings are the problem, not my behavior. It puts the issue on the other person's emotional response rather than taking any ownership. If this has come out of your mouth, you're not alone. Like I said, a bajillion people have said this, but it's definitely worth retiring and not keeping that in your repertoire of apologies. Okay, the next one is, I'm sorry, but. When someone says something like that, it kind of erases everything that was said in front of the but. I'm sorry I raised my voice, but you weren't listening to me. You just took away the sorry part with your but. What your spouse can hear is that you're not actually sorry, and here's the reason why. Here is the defense. The moment you add that, you're shifting from like ownership and accountability to justification. And the justification, It might be valid, your point might be valid, but in that exact moment is not the right time, because that says that you're more interested in being right than you are in repairing. Okay, the third one is having like a very vague apology. I said I was sorry, sheesh. With no specifics, no acknowledgement of like what you did wrong. This a lot of times comes from like this place of discomfort. Some people find apologizing really, really hard, and I want to validate and say that I understand that. So for those people, the quickest and easiest thing that they can say, I'm sorry, okay, I'm sorry. Get it out of their mouth, get out of this uncomfortable situation, move on, let the conversation be done. But it leaves your spouse kind of feeling like, did you really understand like why you hurt me? Did you really understand what went wrong? Are you gonna do it again? It feels like they can't fully trust you, because again, it just feels like there's this missing link to having actual repair. Okay, the next one is an apology that comes with an expectation. This is a little bit sneaky because it's not so much an apology as it is a transaction. I said I'm sorry, can we just move on now? The repair is being rushed, again, because the apologizer is uncomfortable. But the problem is that healing and repair doesn't usually work on a timeline and isn't just going to be resolved in 5 seconds. When you apologize and you expect everything to be fine, you're putting your own comfort over your spouse's hurt feelings. And that's a problem. Okay, the last one that I really want to highlight, and that's probably one of the biggest or like heaviest ones, is an apology with no change. If you are apologizing for the same thing over and over and nothing is actually shifting, at some point your apology means nothing. They're just empty words. With an apology needs to come a shift in behavior, and your spouse needs to see that. Evidence that you're sorry, that you're remorseful for what you're doing, that you are turning a different direction. So now that we've talked about some non-apology apologies, I want to talk about what does actually work well. I also want to include, like, this does not have to be long or complicated. Apologies can be really quick and simple, but they just have to have the right ingredients. I think it's helpful to think about an apology having 4 main parts. The first one is naming what you did, acknowledgement. Not in a vague, I'm sorry for how things went kind of way, but I'm sorry that I walked away in the middle of our conversation. I'm sorry I snapped at you in front of the kids. I'm sorry I said that. That was really uncalled for and I should not have said that. When you name this specific thing, you're helping your spouse to feel seen by you. That makes it also feel like you understand what happened and what you put them through. That is already starting to begin to rebuild safety between the two of you. Okay, the second piece is acknowledging the impact. This is where a lot of apologies fall short. You might know what you did, but do you really understand how they received it? Like, what are they sitting with right now as a result of what you did or you said? You could say something like, I imagine that that felt really dismissive to you. Or I know that that probably looked like and it appeared that I wasn't taking you seriously. Or even that had to really hurt. I'm sorry. And sometimes they'll tell you exactly what they felt in their experiences, and so you can just use those words because they came directly from them. But if not, it's still good for you to imagine and have some empathy of like, what are they dealing with and how can I put that into words? The third thing is taking ownership without conditions. No buts. No, I only did that because. Just acknowledge what you did. This requires a lot of humility, I know, but it is a very, very crucial part for the healing process, not just for them, but also for you. I think sometimes we don't realize how, yes, technically apologies are for the other person, but they're also really good for us. Like, we need to, in our own way, remind ourselves that we are imperfect and that we need to be humble enough to acknowledge when we mess up. Like, we need to hear ourselves do that, if that makes sense. And the fourth thing is to express what you would do differently next time. This doesn't have to be super detailed. It can be really simple. I want to do better next time at pausing before I get really upset. Or next time I'm going to tell you that I need space before I yell. Or I'm going to work on this. I know that it's not something that I've been paying much attention to. All of this transforms an apology from being transactional to being part of the commitment that you made to each other. It gives your spouse something to hold on to, and it gives you something to work towards. Now I want to circle back really quickly and add kind of like a little asterisk to the but section. Sometimes the situation, the whatever happened as to like contributing factor as to like why you did what you did is actually important to the story. Sometimes your spouse really needs to know that, and sometimes you really need them to know. So I would say that if there's something that you want to explain, it's good to start with the apology. Or even start with like, what happened? You could say something like, I was running late on the way home. I was so stressed. I am so sorry. I know that's not an excuse. I just totally forgot to pick this up at the store, or whatever the case is, right? An example where you're giving them context, but not making that be an excuse. I think that's a really big key part to it. If you're like, I really need them to know these details. Sometimes it's okay to share the details. It's just how you do it. Okay, next I want to talk about how important it is to be able to receive an apology. I feel like this gets left out of the equation, and it is just as important as giving a good apology. If your spouse gives you a genuine apology and you immediately list out everything else they've ever done wrong, you are not receiving the apology. If you say it's fine, but it's not really fine, and then you bring it up 3 days later, you are not receiving the apology. Now, I don't want to make that seem like you're obligated to accept the apology immediately, because that's not what I'm saying. You're allowed to need time to process and to think through things. You're allowed to say, I hear you, and I just need a little bit of time to process that. That is honest and healthy, and that's totally fine. But at some point, if you want actual repair, there has to be a willingness to move on. Holding every apology at arm's length becomes a barrier to intimacy and actual repair. Receiving it could sound something like, thank you, I really appreciate you saying that. Or thank you, I really needed to hear that. Or I appreciate you saying that. I'm still working on kind of absorbing everything you said, but thank you. You don't also have to jump to immediate forgiveness just because you accept somebody's apology. But letting your spouse know that you have actually really received it and taken it to heart is a part of the repair process. Now, I want to talk to those of you who physically feel like apologizing makes you uncomfortable. There's a lot of times a reason underneath why that's the case. It could be you're a type of person that it wasn't modeled well for you. Maybe nobody said sorry growing up. Or they came with humiliation attached to it, like you were a problem or there was something wrong with you. Maybe it felt like a shameful thing versus like a restorative thing in a relationship. So now as an adult, all of that gets triggered. Or maybe for you growing up, mistakes in your family meant punishment or rejection. So admitting fault right now as an adult would feel very dangerous. And for some people, it might just be a pride thing. And I say that very gently. You might really feel like apologizing means losing or weakness so that the other person wins. I want to offer a couple reframes for you, especially on the last one. Apologizing is not losing. Apologizing is leading. It is saying, I value this relationship more than being right, more than being uncomfortable. I know Proverbs talks about how pride comes before a fall, and I think about that a lot when it comes to relationships. That's like such a hard truth to swallow. A lot of times couples get stuck because neither party is willing to take the first step and move forward. And so you both just kind of sit there. I don't want that for your relationship. I don't want you to quietly suffer. So I want you, if you resonated with any of those last couple of things, to take that to heart and see what you can push past against and create a different narrative for yourself and practice apologizing. Okay, I want to give you something that you can literally use this week as well as the kind of script that we talked about earlier. Think about a recent conflict or a moment of tension that you and your spouse have had over the last couple of days. Maybe it feels like sort of resolved, but you know deep down, either you didn't apologize or it actually is not resolved. Maybe it was an apology was given, but it was one of those non-apologies that we talked about earlier, and so of course it didn't land well. Is there an opportunity to go back and actually fully repair things? If so, I want you to take initiative and do something about it. It's never too late. Like, hey, I want to revisit how I apologized earlier this week. That is so honest, will probably take them by surprise and will create so much deeper connection for both of you. And then moving forward, you can just run through in your mind the 4 different pieces to having a good apology. What did you do? What was the impact? Own it clearly. And then what do you want to do differently next time? It doesn't have to be a speech, it just has to be real and from your heart. And if you are in a place where you're like, this is good, I'm really like a practical, concrete steps kind of person, but you need like a little bit more help, I would definitely check out the Conflict First Aid Kit. The link to that is going to be in the description for you. But it is a step-by-step resource that helps you go through de-escalating and repairing conflict. Or if you're in a season where you're like, I just think we need one-on-one help, I would love to work with you. Again, you can reach out with the link that's going to be in the description for you. I hope that this video helped. If it did, would you please like it just so that I know where you're at and what is serving you well. Make sure that you're subscribed so you can catch all of the next videos, and I will see you next time.